the most proper of all New England cities, in that proper year of 1860, stood the home of that exceedingly proper banker, Henry Kennard, and of his wife, Delight, me. It was a very proper, very correct setting for the decorous mid-Victorian dinner party which had been planned. Henry?
Yes, dear?
Will you fasten me, please?
Oh, come now, Delight. Couldn't you call Madeline?
Madeline is busy with the dinner. What's the matter, Henry? Don't you like to button my buttons?
It's not that I object to doing them, Delight, but there's always something indelicate about the way you ask.
Delicate?
Almost as if I were being invited to participate in something Rabelaisian.
Why, Henry, that's lovely.
Lovely? Really, Delight, sometimes I don't understand you at all.
Sometimes. Very little of the time, Henry.
Of late, I must admit that's true. You're so full of, well,
impulses.
Then you're not unaware of them yourself.
Oh, but I'm young, Henry. And so are you. And it's spring.
Yes, much too early, very unseasonable. Now, please hold still.
Do you think I'm being overly sentimental, Henry?
I do.
Oh, dear, when you say I do, it gives me the most peculiar feeling.
Peculiar?
Like I was the board of directors or a committee of some kind.
Nonsense.
Or maybe it isn't that at all. Maybe it's because it reminds me of our wedding.
Isn't that a little inconsistent?
Well, I don't know why that is what you said, isn't it? I do.
I'm sure I must have, but that was 2 years ago, so I'm a little hazy.
So am I. It all happened so quickly, I didn't have time to think.
Mm-hmm.
But lately I have, Henry.
Have what?
Begun to think a little.
I'm glad.
I hope this corset isn't too tight. Last time it ruined my dinner.
You're referring, I presume, to the Harrington banquet.
I couldn't eat a bite.
You proceeded to tell why across the length of the entire table. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington, but I can't swallow your lovely poulet au champignon unless I loosen my stays.
I do disturb you sometimes, don't I, Henry?
You can be very disconcerting.
Don't you ever have an urge to let go, Henry?
Let go? Of what?
No, I guess you don't. You better finish dressing.
I'll be only a few moments.
Henry?
Yes, dear?
What time did you say we'd expect them?
8 o'clock. And I'm sure Mr. and Mrs. Murdoch are very punctual people.
Are they important people?
Very. Mr. Murdoch is a railroad man.
What is a railroad man, Henry?
A railroad man, my dear? A man who builds railroads. Steam cars to compete with the boats between here and Buffalo. Railroad man is a man of courage and quick decisions. Daring, vision, and influence.
My goodness, all that?
Mr. Murdoch has a plan for making use of the old Ohio Road and linking our cities together from Toledo to Erie, even on to Buffalo.
Well, that's nice.
It's more than nice, dear. It's a colossal undertaking.
Has Mr. Murdoch a beard?
No, Mr. Murdoch does not. Mr. Murdoch is still a very young man.
But, Henry, you're only 35 years old and you have a beard.
Well, I'm a banker. Bankers wear beards.
Henry.
Yes, dear?
I'll be very careful tonight not to say anything to displease you.
Thank you, my dear. That's extremely important tonight of all nights.
What depends on it?
What do you mean?
Well, something always depends on my being careful not to say the wrong thing. What is it tonight?
The fact is that I hope to have our bank finance Mr. Murdoch's railroad.
Oh, are you going to?
And I said I hoped. But above all, I wish to gain the vote and influence of Mr. Murdoch for Mr. Lincoln.
Even more than you wish to finance his railroad.
I do.
Oh, dear, there's that I do again. Very, very disconcerting.
I don't see why.
Perhaps it's because I'm beginning to let things bother me, Henry.
What sort of things?
Lots of things. Why we don't share the same room like other people, for instance.
What other people?
Other married people. Our friends.
You mean you've been discussing this with all our friends?
Oh, no, Henry, not all of them.
The reason I decided we must have separate rooms was so that my morning exercises wouldn't wake you up.
But they do anyway.
Do they? I'm always very quiet. Why don't you sit down? Must you walk back and forth?
A lady can be told by her carriage.
A lady can be told by her figure. Not fat, not thin, but rounded. You have nothing to worry about.
Good evening, Mrs. Kennedy. Good evening, Madeline. I'm afraid I was terribly slow in dressing. Is everything ready?
Yes, ma'am. And Cook is getting terribly cross.
Cook is always cross after her day off. You look very pretty tonight, Madeline.
Oh, well, thank you, ma'am. You look very fetching yourself, if I may say so. Such a beautiful dress.
Isn't it lovely? It's imported from Paris. It's the latest rage. Oh, and look. Aren't they naughty?
Oh, Mrs. Kennard, there are times you don't seem at all like the mistress of this house.
Really? You know, sometimes Mr. Kennard doesn't think so either. How is the turkey?
Nice and brown, ma'am.
And the bean porridge?
Just the way Mr. Kennard likes it, ma'am.
Oh, did Cook add the English sauce?
I don't know, ma'am.
Well, you better run along and find out.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, that'll be the guest, ma'am.
You run along, Madeline. I'll get it.
Oh, now you know how Mr. Kennard disapproves of you opening the front door.
You won't tell him, will you?
No, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening. Please come in.
Thank you.
It's very good to see you both.
Well, Mr. Kennard's daughter?
I am Mr. Kennard's wife.
Oh, please forgive me. I'm Murdoch. May I present Mrs. Murdoch?
How do you do?
My dear.
Please take off your wrap and go into the parlor. I'm so glad you could come.
Well, it was so nice of your husband to ask us.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
You'll have to excuse him, my dear. My husband hardly knows his own strength.
Henry? Henry?
Are you by any chance calling for help?
I was letting my husband know you were here.
Fans are very flirtatious. Did you know that?
I don't know what I know.
What have you done to your lips?
Oh, I tinted them with geranium petals.
Really? Why?
To look prettier.
Oh, come now. You?
Oh.
Tell me, do they taste?
Well, good evening, Mr. Murdoch.
How are you, Kennard?
We're honored. How's the weather been with you in Mayfield?
Changeable, quite unpredictable, in fact. Tell me, Kennard, there's something extremely different about you.
Oh! Henry. Oh, your beard.
No, your eyes do not deceive you, my dear. It's gone.
But Henry,
I was suddenly tired of it, so I shaved it off.
you look so different. I've never seen you without a beard before. You're a perfect stranger to me.
That, my dear, may prove to be an advantage. And how's the weather been with you in Mayfield, Mr. Murdoch?
Still changeable. I stick to that.
You haven't even a mustache. You look so clean,
I try to be.
so young.
Oh, my darling, you're getting pale. But don't you realize what you've done to her? Must have been a frightful shock. Come. Get you more comfortable. You can't possibly be comfortable.
I am sorry, but it was so unexpected.
Right over here, Mrs. Kennard.
My dear, aren't you allowing yourself to become distraught over nothing?
What is it? What happened to Mrs. Kennard?
A bit of a shock, I'm afraid. Do you have some sherry?
Oh, of course.
It's really silly of me. I'm quite all right.
Rich, what else did you do? She looks so pale.
It was not I, my dear. Mr. Kennard removed his beard without preparing her for the transformation.
Here we are.
Oh, Mr. Kennard, may I present Mrs. Murdoch?
How do you do, Mr. Kennard?
Charmed, Mrs. Murdoch.
There, I think I'm all right. I'm sorry I behaved with so little self-restraint.
I think we could all use a little bracer after that.
No, don't get up.
I assure you, Delight is not usually so emotional.
I'm sure this time she had provocation.
May I propose a toast? To the next President of the United States, Mr. Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln? I'm afraid I'll just have to pass on those sentiments until I'm sure he's the right man.
You mean there's a doubt?
Well, now, please, can't we change the subject?
Yes, with pleasure. Kennard, are you aware that you have a most beautiful wife and that she tints her lips with the juice of geranium flowers?
Really? Oh, well, that's quite enough, thank you.
That's unheard of.
But she told me.
It's true, Henry. I did tint my mouth.
Well, I hardly know what to say.
Well, I knew that Mr. and Mrs. Murdoch were important to you, and, well, that you wanted everything to be our best. The turkey, the apple dumplings, everything, so I just brightened up my mouth a bit.
I simply cannot conceive of such a thing being important to you.
Oh, it isn't important. It was just incidental, like having the curtains washed or the decanter polished.
I hardly think it was necessary.
Oh, but it was necessary, because I know that you want to finance Mr. Murdoch's railroad so that he and his nice friends can vote for Mr. Lincoln.
Delight, how could...
Dinner is served.
Mrs. Murdoch, may I have the honor?
Thank you, Mr. Kennard.
But you told me so, Henry. You made it clear to me. Oh, I've done it again.
Thanks for the warning. You know, you are unique.
Whenever Henry's angry with me, he just walks away.
Well, if you belonged to me and I were angry with you, I wouldn't walk away. Mrs. Kennard, you and I are impulsive, lawless people. We match.
Goddess Beardy's a perfect stranger to me. It's been an awful shock.
Are you coming, Britt?
Yes, my dear. You're as definite and straightforward as a child.
I am?
And cruel, too. Don't you realize what such candor can do to people?
Too upset to think my forehead is all damp.
I'd give a lot to kiss you, but there is such a thing as honor.
Oh, yes. Yes, there is.
And you're my host's wife. They're waiting for us. Besides, if I kissed you once, I'd kiss you again, and that might take time.
Yes, it might.
Mrs. Kennard. Mrs. Kennard. May I have the honor? Did I ever tell you about the mongoose and the railroad coach?
Oh, no, but please, not that one. I always laugh at my husband's old jokes, but sometimes he does go a bit too far back.
Well, in that case, I'll switch from the ridiculous to the sublime and compliment Mrs. Kennard on a most delicious meal. It's beautiful.
I'll convey your sentiments to the cook. She'll be very pleased.
My only complaint could be that your husband served too much Mr. Lincoln with each course.
The present crisis is no such thing as too much of Mr. Lincoln.
He's too raw, awkward, and unschooled.
But a master of men?
This country does not want a master of men.
This country does not want slavery.
Part of it does.
Do you?
I do not, sir.
Now, Henry, remember your dyspepsia. Would you care to see the new Italian chest Henry brought from Boston?
Oh, I'd love to. I have one myself, but I'm sure yours is much nicer.
Would you gentlemen excuse us, please?
Indeed.
And remember, no politics.
Very well, my dear. No politics.
Oh, it's beautiful, Mrs. Kennard. Such delicate design.
I got it in Paris as part of my trousseau.
How your husband must have adored it.
Oh, I've never worn it. I've never dared. It's so sort of scandalous, don't you think?
Well, perhaps so, but why not? It rather suits you, like this boudoir. Such unique taste.
Henry says I have a touch of the pagan in me, but I hate anything gloomy. I love things bright. I like parties and people and...
You should have children, Mrs. Kennard. A whole house full.
Oh, I've often thought about it and hoped. But Henry... Do you have children, Mrs. Murdoch?
Oh, no. Only Mr. Murdoch. And sometimes he can be quite juvenile. But surely you've wanted children.
Oh, yes. I've always wanted a girl. Although a boy would be nice, too. Or even both.
Doesn't Mr. Kennard share your hopes?
Well, I don't really know. I've never asked him.
Never asked. But, my dear, the most important thing in life.
Yes, I know. But you see, our marriage is rather formal. He's just never discussed it.
Well, then make him discuss it, my dear. Make him.
Nobody can make me do anything against my will. That, Mr. Murdoch, is something in which I pride myself.
An admirable quality.
Important quality in a banker, Mr. Murdoch. A man who's entrusted with other people's money, other people's property, should not be susceptible to undue influence. He must be above suspicion and above reproach. I believe that it's this respect for integrity that's attracted me so strongly to Mr. Lincoln.
You seem to have a high regard for tenacity also.
I beg your pardon?
Continually return to this rail splitter from Illinois.
Mr. Lincoln has insight and courage. He came up from the meanest poverty, from a rugged frontier, it's true. Mr. Lincoln has proved himself to be a greater type of man.
Than whom?
Than Douglas. I tell you, Mr. Lincoln is not in this fight for himself.
I wonder what's keeping the ladies.
I see that you give me no alternative but to explain.
Explain?
Mr. Murdoch, what my wife told you before supper was the truth. My bank does wish to finance your railroad, and not as a favor to you.
Thank you.
We go after business. It's good, legitimate business. In this case, revolutionary business, but we believe in the future of our country.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that.
However, you and I can come to an agreement on business downtown in my office. The reason I invited you to my home tonight, Mr. Murdoch, goes further. It goes higher and it digs deeper than business.
Go on.
I invited you here tonight, Mr. Murdoch, in order to try and secure your vote. Your great influence politically throughout the state for Mr. Abraham Lincoln.
That you've made clear. So she did speak the embarrassing truth.
She spoke the exact truth.
And what were you prepared to offer me for my vote?
I don't offer you anything. I asked you here in hopes I could persuade you.
Don't be naive, Kenneth. When I deal, I deal.
Deal? Do you mean that you'd be unscrupulous enough to bargain with your country's future?
Don't be childish, Kenneth. You allowed yourself to become a Lincoln fanatic. I've had enough of this. Margaret! Margaret!
Yes, Fred?
Please come down immediately. And pray ask Mrs. Kennard to come with you. I'd like to say good night. We're leaving.
Oh, but Fred, we just finished supper.
Of that, I'm extremely grateful. Please get your cloak.
But why must you leave? The evening's just begun.
I'm sorry.
We haven't even had time to look at the chest.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Kennard, but I came here in good faith to have supper with friends, and I find myself in the midst of a conspiracy.
Henry, politics, and you promised.
I'm sorry, Delight, but
You do my husband an injustice, Mr. Murdoch.
I think not.
I think so. He is too honest to conspire. He tries to reason. He believes so deeply in Mr. Lincoln himself, he cannot understand how others cannot believe. But I am not too honest to conspire, Mr. Murdoch. And neither are you.
That's true. I'm a man of my word.
I believe you are. What we want from you tonight is the promise of your vote for Mr. Lincoln. You will see that we value our country above money. Do you?
I have my own scale of values. Well, Margaret, this must be very painful to you. Please put on your cloak and join me in the carriage.
But Mrs. Murdoch wants to see the new Italian chest.
She does?
Yes.
Where is it?
In the spare bedroom at the end of the hall.
Very well, Margaret. Go up and see it. Examine it well, ascertain whether or not it's an older Italian chest than ours, and then join me in the carriage.
now see here, Murdoch.
Kenneth, I'd appreciate another glass of port.
Very well.
Now, Mrs. Kenneth, you admit that you're not too honest to consider. What am I offered for my vote? I mean, personally. What'll you give me for my switch to Lincoln? My influence? My vote? When I deal, I deal. I promise.
You mean you'd accept a bribe?
I said I'd give a lot to kiss you. Call it what you will. Come. We've only a moment.
What if the moment wouldn't be worthwhile?
It would be to me, I promise.
Your light. Murdoch, get out of my house.
Good night, Mr. Kennard. Goodbye, Mrs. Kennard.
Oh, it was lovely, Mrs. Kennard. Are you ready, Bridge?
Yes, quite.
Henry,
Yes?
I want to talk to you. Explain.
There could be no possible explanation.
Henry, I didn't like him. I just liked it. Can't you understand?
You're a shameless woman.
Well, who cares for a little thing like shame when one is fighting for one's life?
You're not fighting for your life. Your life is quite safe.
But my happiness isn't. And my happiness is more important to me than my life. Henry, I'm coming in. It wasn't the man, Henry. It was the... I was thinking of you.
A moment like that, I keep seeing you abandoned to him. The sight seared my eyeballs.
You cared.
What am I made of, Flint? Of course I cared. I was sick with fury, envy, and longing.
Longing?
Yes. But I've always been bound by my own will. I've never abandoned myself as he was shameless enough to do. I've been honest and upright.
Oh, but Henry, it would be right for you. It would be upright and honest if you really loved me. Not pleasantly, but terribly as I do you. Like not bearing to be apart. Pushing the clock ahead when you're gone to make it hurry. I even love the pillars outside your bank, Henry. I'd steal for you. I'd lie. Of course I kissed him. I'd do anything for you, Henry, anything.
Now. Don't cry, darling. I love you, too. Desperately. You've been a treasure. Too delicate to touch. Something to set up on a shelf and admire. To cherish. Keep safe from harm. To look at. Not to touch. I love you more than anything in the world or out of it. And I revere you, too.
But I don't want to be revered. I want to be kissed. Not like him, not for Mr. Lincoln, but like you and me. Oh, thank you, Mr. Lincoln. Thank you.